For millennia, humanity had lived beneath the oppressive shadows of the galaxy's most ancient and powerful civilizations. The Vixians, a race of towering, crystalline beings, had built their empire on a foundation of mysticism and fear, ruling over the stars with a cold, calculating hand. The Crythians, an insectoid species with an insatiable hunger for conquest, had carved out their empire through sheer brutality, their warships legendary for their speed and ferocity. And the Siltar, an enigmatic species of near-immortal beings whose intellect far surpassed that of any other, had woven a web of control, manipulating the fates of entire worlds through diplomacy and deceit. In the vast expanse of space, humanity was nothing more than a fragile, fledgling species, small, scattered, and vulnerable. The galaxy was ruled by ancient empires whose power was unquestioned, their rule stretching across the stars. Humanity had been relegated to the fringes, cast aside as insignificant, unworthy of notice. For centuries, our species had fought tooth and nail for survival, our colonies growing in secret, hidden away from the eyes of the dominant empires. We had been under their thumb for so long that many had come to accept the status quo that the galaxy's rulers would forever remain beyond our reach, and that humanity would forever be subjugated. But then, something began to change. The technological advances that humanity had made were initially slow and painstaking. We were often outclassed by the more advanced species of the galaxy. We lacked the vast fleets of the Crythians, the ancient knowledge of the Siltar, and the psychic powers of the Vixians. Yet, what we lacked in power, we made up for in ingenuity, resourcefulness, and an unwavering will to survive. As our technology advanced, humanity began to push the boundaries of what was possible. We discovered new methods of energy manipulation, quantum technology that allowed us to tap into the very fabric of space-time itself. We learned how to harness the power of black holes, turning them into stable energy sources capable of powering entire fleets. And with these breakthroughs, we began to develop weapons that could rival even the most formidable of our enemies. It was a quiet revolution, one that unfolded far away from the gaze of the galaxy's dominant powers. Our colonies, once isolated and vulnerable, began to flourish. We constructed vast fleets of warships, built from materials that could withstand the most powerful of enemy weapons. We developed new forms of warfare, stealth technology, advanced tactics, and AI-guided systems that allowed us to outthink and outmaneuver our opponents. And yet, for all our technological progress, the empires of the galaxy remained indifferent. They still viewed humanity as nothing more than a nuisance, a species barely worth acknowledging. But this underestimation would be their undoing. Humanity was no longer the weak, insignificant race they believed us to be. The turning point came in the form of a single, fateful event the day humanity broke the chains. It started with a small, unassuming mining colony on the fringe of the galaxy, deep within Vixian-controlled space. The Vixians had long exploited the planet for its rich mineral resources, using it as a means to fuel their vast, galaxy-spanning empire. The miners, human and alien alike, were treated as little more than slaves, forced to work in the most brutal of conditions. But something within the human miners began to shift. For years, they had toiled in silence, watching as their Vixian overlords reveled in luxury while they struggled to survive. But the spark of rebellion had always been there, waiting for the right moment to ignite. And that moment came when a group of human miners discovered something that would change everything: a hidden cache of ancient Vixian technology, buried beneath the surface of the planet for centuries. The discovery was both a curse and a blessing. The technology, while incredibly advanced, was unstable, dangerous, and untested. Yet, in their desperation, the miners saw it as a means to fight back. They secretly began to reverse engineer the technology, working in the shadows, knowing that if they were discovered, their lives would be forfeit. But the potential of the technology was too great, and soon, the miners had developed weapons capable of striking back at their Vixian oppressors. One by one, the Vixian soldiers stationed on the planet were eliminated in covert strikes, their technology and strongholds sabotaged. The human miners, once helpless and enslaved, began to take control of the planet. Word spread quickly, and within weeks, the rebellion had spread to other colonies. Humanity, it seemed, was no longer willing to be subjugated. The Vixian Empire, too proud and too dismissive of human capabilities, was caught off guard. They sent fleets to quell the rebellion, but by the time they arrived, the humans had already fortified their positions. The once dominant Vixian forces were struck down by guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and the sheer determination of those who had lived in the shadows for so long. It was the first taste of victory, and it would prove to be the catalyst that sparked a galaxy-wide uprising. The fall of the Vixian-controlled mining colony was a shock to the galaxy's ruling powers. The Vixians, who had once considered themselves untouchable, had been outsmarted by a species they had long dismissed. But their humiliation would be short-lived. The other galactic powers, led by the Crithians and the Siltar, were quick to respond. The Crithians, eager to quash the rebellion before it spread further, assembled a vast armada of warships, intent on wiping humanity from the stars. The Siltar, ever calculating and strategic, saw humanity's sudden rise as a disruption to the carefully balanced status quo. They too began to mobilize their fleets, sensing that a species that could topple the Vixians might one day challenge their own dominion. But humanity, emboldened by its success, was not content to simply remain on the defensive. We began to strike back, not just against the Vixians, but against all who sought to keep us in chains. The rebellion grew in strength and numbers, fueled by the knowledge that we were no longer the weak, fractured species we had once been. We were united, and we had the means to fight back. Humanity began to build a fleet of its own, one that would rival the greatest of the galactic powers. We forged alliances with other oppressed species, offering them the chance to join us in overthrowing their oppressors. The galaxy was on the brink of war, but this time, it would not be humanity that was crushed. It would be the empires that had long ruled the stars. The first major confrontation came at the Battle of Seraphis, a system located on the border of Vixian and Crithian space. The battle would be the first true test of humanity's resolve and military might. The Vixians, still stung by their defeat at the mining colony, had reinforced their forces, sending their most powerful fleets to reclaim their lost territories. They were determined to crush humanity's uprising before it spread beyond control. The Crithians, seeing an opportunity to eliminate a potential threat to their own empire, joined forces with the Vixians, assembling a combined fleet of over 200 warships. Humanity, with a fleet of just 50 ships, stood at the edge of the Seraphis system, waiting for the oncoming assault. The battle that ensued was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The Crithian and Vixian fleets came at humanity's forces with overwhelming speed, intending to destroy us before we could properly organize. But humanity was no longer the underdog. Our warships, though fewer in number, were equipped with technology derived from the very artifacts we had discovered in the rebellion. We had learned how to outthink and outmaneuver the galactic powers, using stealth, ambush tactics, and advanced AI to turn the tide of the battle. For hours, the skies above Seraphis burned as humanity's fleet fought tooth and nail to hold its ground. The Vixians, despite their superior numbers, were unable to land a decisive blow. The Crithians, too, found themselves at a disadvantage, unable to match the adaptability and cunning of humanity's military leadership. And then, in the final hour of the battle, humanity's fleet struck. A devastating surprise attack, launched from within the asteroid belt of the Seraphis system, crippled the Vixian flagship and forced the Crithian forces to retreat. The combined fleets of the two empires were shattered, and for the first time in millennia, humanity had proven that it could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's mightiest powers. The victory at Seraphis was not just a military success, it was a statement. Humanity had broken the chains. The galaxy had underestimated us, and now they would learn to fear our rise. The Battle of Seraphis was just the beginning. As word spread of humanity's victory, more and more colonies joined the rebellion, and more species rallied to our cause. The Vixians, once the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, were now on the defensive. The Crithians, who had once seen themselves as the galaxy's natural conquerors, were forced to turn inward, retreating to their own territories to regroup. Humanity's fleet grew exponentially, and with it, our influence. We began to take control of key strategic systems, establishing new colonies that served as the backbone of our new empire. The galaxy's former rulers, now on the back foot, were forced to negotiate with us, offering us trade, resources, and, in some cases, peace. But humanity was not content to simply be left alone. The old empires had ruled for too long, and they would never be allowed to hold dominion over the stars again. We set our sights on taking control of the galaxy not as conquerors, but as liberators. The chains that had bound humanity for so long had been broken, and now the galaxy would bend to our will. Humanity's reign had begun. As humanity's power grew, so too did the threats against us. The Siltar, who had long manipulated events from the shadows, began to move more openly, fearing that humanity's rise would undo everything they had worked for. The Crithians and Vixians, though weakened, were far from defeated, and they began to form an alliance of their own, hoping to strike back at humanity's growing empire. But humanity was no longer the underdog. We had tasted victory, and we were willing to fight for our future. The final confrontation would take place in the heart of the galaxy, where the fate of all would be decided. The galaxy had changed. Where once there had been an oppressive silence, now there was a growing hum of activity. Humanity's presence had become undeniable. Our fleets, once small and untested, now stretched across dozens of systems, bolstered by the support of other species who had cast off the chains of their former masters. The Vixians, Crithians, and Siltar had retreated to their strongholds, but they could not shake the feeling of an impending reckoning. The old order, which had held for millennia, was crumbling. But humanity's rise had not been without its cost. With every system we liberated, with every victory won, there was a shadow of doubt. Were we ready to lead a galaxy that had long been accustomed to oppression? Could we balance the immense responsibility of holding dominion over the stars? The truth was, humanity had never known peace in this way. We had been born in struggle, shaped by war, and while we had broken the chains, the task ahead was far from simple. Behind the scenes, political factions began to form within the human ranks. Some saw the rise to power as an opportunity for revenge, to oppress those who had once held us down. Others, more pragmatic, understood that humanity's future depended on forging alliances and maintaining peace across our growing empire. But the galaxy was not a place for peace, it was a place where power was the only currency that mattered. In the shadows, a new threat began to emerge. The Ender, the ancient entity that had lurked at the fringes of the galaxy, stirred once more. It was not a species, nor an empire, but a force, a remnant of the cataclysmic events that had led to the creation of the galaxy itself. The Ender had lain dormant for centuries, but now, as humanity's light spread across the galaxy, its presence was becoming undeniable. Some spoke of it as a myth, others as a cosmic inevitability, a force of entropy that sought to undo all that had been created. But what was certain was that the Ender would not be content to allow humanity's rise to continue unchecked. As tensions grew, humanity's leaders called for a summit, an urgent meeting of the minds to discuss the way forward. We were at the precipice of a new era, and we could not afford to falter now. But as representatives from the former galactic powers gathered in the great citadel of unity, a silent alarm rang across the galaxy. The Ender was not just an idea, it was here, and it was closing in fast. The summit at Unity was meant to be a moment of diplomacy, a chance for humanity to solidify its role as the leader of the galaxy. But when the ambassadors from the Crithian, Vixian, and Siltar empires arrived, they were met with a stark reality. The Ender was real. It had manifested as a massive, shadowy presence that seemed to warp the very fabric of space around it. Entire star systems had been wiped out without warning, swallowed by an unseen force. The situation escalated quickly. The gathered leaders debated frantically, each faction holding onto its own vision of the future. The Vixians insisted on using their ancient technologies to combat the Ender, hoping that their deep understanding of the unknown could provide a solution. The Crithians, always militaristic, proposed a full-scale war, using their fleets to engage the entity head-on. The Siltar, ever patient and calculating, urged caution, preferring to observe and gather more information before making any decisive moves. But humanity's leaders, who had risen to power through their refusal to be controlled by the old empires, took a different approach. They proposed a radical solution: unification. The only way to defeat the Ender was not through military force, not through ancient mysticism, but through the collective might of all species, human and alien alike, working together. It was a proposal that shocked the room. Unity was a concept that had never existed in the galaxy. The empires had always maintained their dominance through division and competition. But humanity had brought something new to the table: the idea that the future of the galaxy depended not on war, but on cooperation. The decision was not easy, and it was met with fierce resistance. Old wounds were not easily healed, and many saw humanity's rise as a threat to their own power. But the Ender was a threat unlike any other, and slowly, the arguments began to shift. The Crithians, once the most aggressive of the galactic powers, grudgingly agreed to join the effort. The Vixians, too, recognized that their ancient technologies could not stop the Ender alone. And the Siltar, ever the schemers, saw the potential for long-term control if they aligned themselves with the human-led coalition. Thus, a fragile alliance was born: a coalition of species that had once been enemies, now united by the common goal of survival. With the alliance in place, humanity's new fleet, now composed of ships from the various galactic powers, mobilized to face the Ender. The combined forces gathered at the edge of the galaxy, in a system known as Riven 9, where the Ender's presence had been most heavily felt. It was a place of deep cosmic voids, where stars flickered and planets were slowly consumed by the Force. The battle that followed was unlike anything ever witnessed. The Ender was not a being of flesh, but a manifestation of entropy itself, an all-consuming force that bent reality to its will. It was impervious to conventional weapons, and no amount of firepower seemed to slow its advance. The galaxy's greatest minds, the best scientists, strategists, and engineers, had come together to formulate a plan, but they quickly realized that their knowledge was insufficient to comprehend the true nature of the Ender. As the battle raged on, humanity's role became clearer. Our ingenuity, our adaptability, and our refusal to accept defeat became the key to holding the line. The human fleet, though smaller in number, was the first to adapt its tactics, learning to use the Ender's own power against it. Through quantum manipulation, we were able to create temporary rifts in space-time, forcing the Ender to momentarily retreat into the void. But the fight was far from over. The Ender's power was limitless, and it was only a matter of time before it would find a way to break through. As the battle seemed to reach its breaking point, humanity's brightest minds unveiled a final, desperate plan. Using the knowledge gleaned from the Vixian technologies and the collective efforts of the galaxy's greatest scientists, humanity proposed an experimental weapon, a device capable of harnessing the power of a collapsing star and redirecting it as a focused beam of energy. This weapon, however, was unstable and could easily backfire, potentially destroying entire systems in the process. The decision was made. The weapon would be deployed, and humanity would lead the charge to deliver the fatal blow to the Ender. It was a final gambit, one that could either save the galaxy or wipe out everything humanity had fought for. The human fleet, along with its allies, advanced toward the Ender's core, where its power seemed to be most concentrated. Time was running out. The Ender had begun to fracture entire systems, tearing them apart as its energy spread like a virus. The galaxy's survival hung in the balance. Humanity's warships moved into position, and with a synchronized effort, the device was activated. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the Ender might overpower the weapon before it could be fully deployed. But humanity's sheer will to survive, the strength of our resolve, pushed us forward. As the weapon fired, a brilliant, blinding beam of energy pierced the heart of the Ender, disrupting its very existence. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. The Ender, unable to withstand the force of the weapon, began to dissipate. Its form shattered, crumbling into nothingness. The battle was over. The galaxy had been saved, but the victory came at a great cost. The weapon had drained vast amounts of energy, and entire fleets had been lost in the final push. The combined forces of the Crithians, Vixians, Siltar, and humans had won, but the scars of the battle would be felt for generations. The old empires, once so sure of their dominance, were now forced to rebuild, their power shattered. Humanity, now at the center of the galaxy, was left to pick up the pieces. But the victory was not one of revenge. It was not one of domination. Humanity's rise had been hard-earned, and it had come with the understanding that the galaxy was not a place for one species to rule, but for all species to thrive together. We had broken the chains of oppression, and now we would forge a new galaxy, one where the legacy of cooperation, ingenuity, and unity would guide us forward into the stars. The galaxy had changed forever. And humanity, once the underdog, had become its greatest protector. The reign of the old empires had ended. The era of humanity's ascendancy had begun. And the galaxy, at long last, was free. Part 12: The Dawn of a New Era. In the aftermath of the battle against the Ender, the galaxy was left in a delicate balance. The ancient empires Vixians, Crithians, Siltar were reeling from the loss. Their fleets had been decimated, their strongest defenses shattered. The Ender had been a threat unlike any they had ever encountered, and it had taken every ounce of strength and unity to defeat it. But now that the threat had passed, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. Humanity, once a scattered and oppressed species, was now at the forefront of this new era. The alliances formed during the war against the Ender had proved to be more than temporary truces. They had evolved into something more lasting, a coalition of species, all united under the banner of cooperation and mutual survival. Humanity's leadership had proven itself in the crucible of battle, and the galaxy had taken notice. No longer were we seen as mere pests or a secondary species. Humanity had earned its place at the table. The great citadel of unity, located in the heart of the galaxy, became the headquarters of this new coalition. It was a symbol of everything humanity had achieved, a monument to the strength that could be forged from the fires of adversity. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy gathered there to discuss matters of diplomacy, governance, and the future of the galaxy. At the heart of it all stood the humans who had brought the galaxy to this point. Leaders like Admiral Aeliana Solari, whose tactical brilliance had turned the tide at Seraphis, Dr. Elias Morrow, a brilliant scientist who had developed the quantum technologies that allowed humanity to harness the power of collapsing stars, and Chancellor Maria Vasquez, whose political acumen had kept the fragile alliance together in the face of overwhelming odds. The first few months after the battle were marked by a period of intense rebuilding. Entire fleets had been lost in the final assault against the Ender, and countless planets had been ravaged by the chaos that had followed in its wake. But humanity, with its unyielding drive and ingenuity, spearheaded the recovery efforts. We brought together resources from every corner of the galaxy, alien and human alike, to restore what had been lost and rebuild the fractured systems. But as the dust settled and the galaxy began to heal, new questions emerged. The old powers, those who had once ruled the galaxy with impunity, were not content to simply fade into obscurity. The Vixians, once the most powerful empire in the galaxy, were now a broken people, scattered and uncertain. Their ruling caste, the Crystalline Council, had been decimated in the wake of the Ender's defeat. Their ancient technologies, once thought infallible, had proven ineffective against the new reality that humanity had ushered in. The Crithians, too, were reeling. Their military doctrine had been based on raw power and overwhelming force, but their fleets had been crushed under the weight of humanity's ingenuity. Yet, their pride was unbroken. Their warrior culture demanded that they restore their honor, and they began to rebuild their military might, slowly but surely. They would not accept being subjugated by humanity, no matter how much they had to sacrifice to reclaim their former glory. The Siltar, the most enigmatic and ancient species of all, were perhaps the most inscrutable. Their quiet manipulation had been a hallmark of their rule, and they had survived countless centuries of galactic upheaval by staying in the shadows. They had watched humanity's rise with a mix of caution and curiosity. They saw the potential in humanity, a species that had once been nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's history, now rising to reshape the very fabric of galactic order. But the Siltar were not quick to reveal their intentions. They were the galaxy's greatest tacticians, and their true goals were not yet clear. For humanity, the road ahead was not without challenges. The victory over the Ender had united the galaxy, but it had also exposed the deep fissures between the old empires and the new order humanity had helped create. There was talk of a new galactic government, one that would represent all species fairly and equally. But the old powers were not willing to give up their influence without a fight. Chancellor Maria Vasquez knew that maintaining peace in this new galaxy would require delicate diplomacy. The galaxy's future could not be decided through military might alone. The lessons of the war against the Ender had shown that cooperation was the key to survival. Humanity had to lead by example, not through domination, but through the strength of unity. In the months following the defeat of the Ender, a council was formed, a governing body made up of representatives from every species, each given equal say in the future of the galaxy. This council would be humanity's greatest test. It would prove whether we had the wisdom to lead, or if our rise to power had been a fleeting moment in galactic history. The Council of Unity convened for the first time in the Grand Halls of Unity Citadel, a massive structure that stretched across an entire planet, with spires that reached high into the atmosphere. It was here that humanity would take the first steps toward true galactic governance. For the first time, the galaxy's former rulers, Vixians, Crithians, Siltar, and others sat side by side with humanity, all in the spirit of cooperation. Chancellor Vasquez opened the council's first session with a call for peace and reconciliation. She reminded the assembled representatives that the galaxy had been fractured for too long, and that now was the time to heal old wounds. There would be no more conquest. No more exploitation. The galaxy would be governed by mutual respect and collaboration. And humanity, as the catalyst of this new age, would lead by example. But not all were in agreement. The Vixians, although weakened, still held on to their ancient pride. They argued that humanity's rise had come at their expense, and that they deserved a greater role in the new order. The Crithians, too, were vocal in their dissatisfaction. They had always been the warriors, the conquerors. The idea of submitting to a coalition of equals was unpalatable to them. The Siltar, ever the observers, remained silent, their inscrutable expressions betraying nothing of their true feelings. It was clear that the path forward would not be easy. But humanity was undeterred. We had come from nothing, had risen from the ashes of oppression and struggle, and we would not falter now. The time of conquest was over. The time of cooperation had begun. But even as the council deliberated, a new threat was emerging, a threat that would test humanity's resolve once again. Unknown to the leaders of the Council of Unity, a faction of radical Crithian warriors had begun to gather in secret. They called themselves the Shadow Fleet, a clandestine group dedicated to restoring Crithian dominance through any means necessary. The Shadow Fleet was made up of Crithians who had rejected the idea of unity, viewing it as weakness. They believed that the galaxy would never be truly peaceful unless Crithian rule was restored. The Shadow Fleet had been assembling in the dark corners of the galaxy, beyond the reach of the Council's influence. They had stolen advanced Vixian technology, modified it to suit their purposes, and constructed a fleet of warships capable of challenging even the combined forces of the galaxy's greatest powers. Their first strike came without warning. They launched a surprise attack on the neutral system of Eric 7, a key hub for trade and diplomacy. The Shadow Fleet decimated the planet's defenses, wiping out entire cities in the blink of an eye. It was an act of terror designed to send a message to the galaxy: Crithian dominance would never be denied. The Council of Unity, though united in its desire for peace, was now faced with a new challenge. The Shadow Fleet's actions threatened to undo everything humanity had worked for. The fragile alliances that had been forged over the past few years were now under strain. The Vixians and Crithians, once bitter enemies, now found themselves in an uneasy alliance, facing a common foe in the form of the Shadow Fleet. Once again, humanity's leadership would be put to the test. The galaxy had been on the verge of peace, but the rise of the Shadow Fleet threatened to plunge it back into war. The Council of Unity was faced with a difficult decision: should they take up arms against the Crithians, risking another galaxy-wide conflict, or should they try to find a way to negotiate with the rogue faction before it was too late? For humanity, the path forward was unclear. But one thing was certain: we had fought too hard and sacrificed too much to allow the galaxy to fall back into the chaos of old. The time for negotiation was over. The time for action had come. Part 15, The Final Test. Humanity's first true test as leaders of the galaxy was about to begin. The Shadow Fleet had struck, and now the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Would humanity be able to unite the galaxy's fractured forces once more? Would we have the courage to face down the rogue Crithians and defend the fragile peace we had worked so hard to create? The final chapter of humanity's rise had yet to be written, but one thing was clear: the day of the underdog was over. Humanity had broken the chains, and now it was time to show the galaxy what we were truly capable of. The future of the stars lay in our hands. Part 16, The Convergence of Forces. The galaxy was on the brink once again. The sudden appearance of the Shadow Fleet had cast a dark shadow over the tenuous peace humanity had fought so hard to establish. Every moment, the ripple effects of their attack spread through the fabric of galactic politics and military strategy. The Council of Unity, once a symbol of hope and collaboration, was now fractured, struggling to maintain the delicate balance that humanity had worked to uphold. But humanity was not unfamiliar with adversity. We had once been an oppressed species, scattered across distant worlds, and we had risen from the ashes of conflict to become the guardians of the stars. Our leaders were accustomed to uncertainty, to dealing with challenges head-on. Chancellor Maria Vasquez, Admiral Eliana Solari, and Dr. Elias Morrow gathered in the war room at Unity Citadel, reviewing the intelligence reports and preparing for the next move. "We can't afford another war," Chancellor Vasquez said, her voice resolute but tinged with concern. "Not when we're this close to stabilizing the galaxy. But we can't let the Shadow Fleet continue unchecked. If we allow this to escalate, the balance of power will shatter, and the galaxy will plunge back into the chaos we fought so hard to escape." Admiral Solari stood at the hollow table, her fingers tracing through holographic schematics of the Shadow Fleet's known movements. The Shadow Fleet is already on the move. They've hit Eric 7, and now they're targeting other neutral worlds along the trade routes. They're isolating systems, cutting off supply lines, and sowing fear. We need to act fast, or we risk a complete breakdown. Dr. Morrow, his face drawn with worry but filled with a quiet determination, leaned over the table. "We can't defeat them using conventional tactics. The Shadow Fleet has incorporated technologies we've never seen before, adaptations of Vixian tech we've only begun to understand. We need to be smarter about this, find a way to outmaneuver them on a strategic level." Chancellor Vasquez nodded in agreement. "We may have won the galaxy's trust by being the underdogs, but we must now prove that we are capable of leading it to peace. We cannot let fear dictate our actions. It's time to call on the galaxy's council for an emergency meeting. We must unite against this threat before it's too late." With a sense of urgency, the Council of Unity was summoned to convene again. Representatives from all the galactic powers, Vixians, Crithians, Siltar, and humans arrived at Unity Citadel. Their expressions were a mix of unease and resolve. Some were hesitant, their old allegiances to their empires still strong, while others were eager to see how humanity would respond to the latest crisis. The council chambers were filled with the weight of history. It had been centuries since a galactic power like humanity had managed to unite the galaxy under one banner. But this moment felt different. The unity was fragile, and the consequences of failure would be catastrophic. Vasquez addressed the assembly. "The Shadow Fleet is a threat that endangers all of us. They seek to divide us, to plunge us back into war, and to undo everything we've built. It is time for us to set aside our differences and face this threat as one. We have already proven that cooperation is the key to survival. Now we must prove it once more." The Vixian representative, a stern and regal figure named Queen Liera, stood up. Humanity's leadership has been invaluable, but we cannot simply ignore the true cause of this rebellion. The Chrithians have always been aggressive, and their pride has always demanded dominance. We cannot trust them to remain loyal in this effort. The Chrithian representative, General Zaris, slammed his fist onto the table, his voice dripping with defiance. You talk about trust, Queen Liera, but it is your people who have sat idly by for too long while we fought and bled to maintain order. Humanity is the new threat, not us. You would see the galaxy fall to chaos rather than allow anyone else to rise to prominence. The room erupted into heated arguments, voices rising in anger. The tensions that had simmered for so long were now spilling over. Vasquez felt the weight of the galaxy's expectations upon her shoulders. This was no longer a matter of just fighting off a fleet, it was a test of leadership, of forging an enduring peace out of the flames of old grudges and new ambitions. Enough! Vasquez commanded, her voice cutting through the din. We cannot afford this infighting now. The Shadow Fleet doesn't care about our politics. It will destroy us all if we don't act. In the silence that followed, Admiral Solari spoke up. The Shadow Fleet isn't just an external threat. It's a symptom of something deeper. It's not just about Chrithian pride or Vixian territorial interests, it's about the failure of the old systems, the inability of the galaxy's great powers to adapt to this new age. Humanity has shown that we can adapt. We've proven that we can lead, but we cannot do it alone. Dr. Morrow added, the Shadow Fleet's use of advanced technology is dangerous. It's clear they've adapted Vixian weaponry and tactics, and there's something else, something alien. They've modified their ships to regenerate faster than anything we've encountered. We need to learn how they're doing it and disrupt it before they gain full control. After a tense moment, Queen Liera spoke again, her tone softened but resolute. Humanity is right. If we do not take collective action, the Shadow Fleet will destroy everything we've worked to build. We have the technology, the knowledge to stand together, but it will take unprecedented cooperation. The room fell silent again, but this time, it was a silence born of contemplation. The galaxy's leaders had come to a realization: they could not let old rivalries determine the future of their worlds. The Shadow Fleet was not just a Chrithian problem, a Vixian issue, or a human challenge, it was a galactic one. And it was only through unity that the galaxy would stand a chance. The Council of Unity was reborn that day. With one voice, the assembled representatives committed to a common cause: the defeat of the Shadow Fleet. The Chrithians, Vixians, Siltar, and humans would work together, pooling their resources, knowledge, and fleets to counter this rogue force. It was a massive gamble, but one that the galaxy could not afford to lose. With the Shadow Fleet posing a galaxy-wide threat, the united forces of the galaxy, led by humanity, launched a counteroffensive. The mission was to disable the Shadow Fleet's regeneration systems, neutralize their weapons, and force their leaders into surrender. The first phase targeted the Shadow Fleet's outer defenses, weakening supply lines and preventing reinforcements. Using humanity's advanced quantum tech, the forces Vixian, Chrithian, Siltar, and human attacked with precision, crippling the enemy's energy grid and weapons. The smaller, agile human fleet struck from the shadows, planting explosives on key targets. Despite these efforts, the Shadow Fleet's regenerative technology allowed them to recover quickly, and their brilliant commanders adapted to the galaxy's tactics. With the tide not turning in their favor, Chancellor Vasquez ordered a final, desperate strike on the fleet's command center to destroy the regenerative cores and collapse their system. This mission required a suicide squadron of elite ships to infiltrate the heart of the enemy fleet and plant the charges. Humanity led the final assault with resolve, intelligence, and a fierce determination to protect the galaxy. The final assault was brutal, but the combined forces of the galaxy, fueled by humanity's courage, overcame the Shadow Fleet. The regenerative systems were sabotaged, and the fleet dissolved into the void. With their command center destroyed, the remaining members of the Shadow Fleet surrendered. The galaxy's fragile peace was secured, but at a great cost. The galaxy's leaders gathered at Unity Citadel, now allies, to begin the hard work of rebuilding. Humanity had not only survived, it had led the galaxy to victory. The reign of humanity had truly begun.